Hi, welcome back to Frank's Vinyl Review. This week we're going to focus on an album by Miles Davis. This one's called E.S.P. I chose this particular record. It's one of my favorite records by Miles. He's obviously has a huge catalog, but this one interestingly was recorded between the 20th and the 22nd of January, all the way back in 1965. So today, with being January 20th, we're celebrating the 58th anniversary of the recording of this Miles Davis masterpiece. So obviously I want to talk a little bit, provide some context behind the sessions and who was on the record. This is a special record in that it was the first time that Miles had taken his new band, and often dubbed the Second Great Quintet. And that band consisted of Miles Davis himself, Wayne Shorter, who had just joined the band the preceding September in the fall of 1964 on tenor saxophone, Tony Williams, the great drummer, young, incredibly young at the time, Ron Carter on bass, and Herbie Hancock on piano, who interestingly is listed as Herb Hancock, not Herbie, but Herb here. Ron Carter, is listed as Ronald Carter. Just to sort of go back to the Second Great Quintet, just an incredible band. Miles had been recording with Tony Williams, Ron Carter, and Herbie Hancock back in the spring of 1963. So, leading up to this particular session, they were just months away from having played with Miles for almost 2 years, right? But Wayne Shorter, really, he was sort of the missing link. And right before Wayne joined, the band had George Coleman play sax, and then Sam Rivers, who I really love. I'm a huge Sam Rivers fan, and he's on the Miles Davis album Live in Tokyo. Again, I love Sam Rivers, but I guess Miles, for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. So Sam Rivers left, and then that gave the opportunity for Wayne Shorter to essentially leave the Art Blakey, the Jazz Messengers. He had been with the Jazz Messengers for a few years. That gave him the opportunity to play with Miles. This is their first studio recording of the Second Great Quintet. They had played in Europe the previous fall, as I mentioned, in the fall of 1964. And there is a great recording called Miles in Berlin. That's a live album. Those are the very first recordings of this band, the Second Great Quintet. I just want to underscore that this is the first studio, their first studio session. And this was recorded in Hollywood, California. Typically, Miles recorded in New York City at Columbia's studios, their studios in Manhattan. But for whatever reason, they decided to change. This was recorded in January, late January, like it is today. But I can't imagine a more beautiful setting, right? Hollywood, California. I thought about these guys. Maybe it was some of the band members, maybe some of their first times out in California. I'm sure it was. So pretty cool to be out there and making great music. So let's dive right into the album. So the album kicks off with the title track called E.S.P. And there's some really interesting unison lines to open this one. And right away I noticed Ron Carter. He's playing some really interesting, some bass with some great chord building and stuff. Wayne drops in first, and you can hear Herbie's piano. He's really patient. He's laying it down nicely. Wayne's still exploring. Miles Davis, he comes in next. He's the veteran on this team of mostly young players, right? This is Miles surrounded with some of the most virtuosic players in jazz at the time. And Miles, the veteran, who had been around for a while, right? He had created a couple movements of music at this point, and he's with these guys. So it's really kind of an interesting fusion, if you will. There's some really, Miles, he's got some nice touches, and to me almost had sort of a Freddie Hubbard-like sound in some of his peaks. And again, Ron Carter is just playing so well. Right out of the back, we hear Ron just killing it. We hear Tony Williams on drums, and we hear that signature ride, or he's, to me, that's one of the signature sounds of the Second Great Quintet is Tony Williams drums, especially with his cymbals. You just hear that, so he's playing that. Nice dissonance by Herbie. Herbie's playing some dissonant chords under Miles' solo, which I thought was kind of interesting. Herbie takes a solo after Miles, and I could hear on this recording, I could hear some like light scatting. It may have been Herbie himself, kind of scatting along, and maybe it was him, maybe it was Miles. I'm not sure. They go back to the opening theme, and then Tony continues to lay it down, and then the track ends. So really, I thought that was a really cool opener. And I guess the title track E.S.P came from the idea that when Wayne joined the band, these guys just had this sort of, right away, they had this telepathy, if you will. And I think that is true here. The next track is called 81. This was written by Ron Carter. Really nice opening theme, and I thought Tony was sublime here. He was playing some really nice stuff. Again, Ron is just killing it on the bass. And I kind of, I got like a blues feel. I thought I could hear 1-4-5 changes, even though it was pretty subtle. But I kind of got that feel like it was sort of a blues vamp, if you will. Some trance like Herbie playing, and I could feel some swing too. There were some subtle changes where it definitely started swinging, and Miles is playing his solo almost like in that cool style. Wayne comes in next, and he's got some really nice lines to open his solo. Very angular, very fluid playing. Again, Ron is just killing it. Wayne, he almost has Albert Ayler-like lines. And I've heard him quote Albert Ayler before. For example, album I just mentioned, Miles in Berlin. On side 2, there's a version of So What, and during Wayne's solo, you can hear him quote Albert Ayler. Really beautiful stuff. They go back in the main theme, and then the baton gets handed over to Herbie, and it's just Herbie, Ron, and Tony, sort of in the trio, if you will, and it's almost like an ensemble solo. It's not even really a solo. Herbie kind of plays a little bit, and then everyone sort of jumps back in. They restate the theme, and there's some harmony lines, but again, a very beautiful tune, and then it sort of fades out. So nice tune on that one. The next song is called Little One, and this was written by Herbie. Herbie and Ron open this one very quietly before Wayne and Miles join in. Wayne and Miles trade lines, and I mean, I a lot of times when I was listening to Miles on this record in particular, I was hearing some sketches of Spain. Like for example, when he would end a line, the vibrato air that he was pushing through his horn. I mean, I was getting these. It just sounded a lot like sketches of Spain. So you're going to hear me say that a lot in this review. So he has that here in Little One. Ron picks up the pace before the music begins to swing a little bit more. Almost like I got a sense like that. The music to me evokes like you're in this sort of summery breeze, if you will. And it had that sort of summery breeze feel. Miles is adding some subtle tension. We hear Tony, he was pretty light, but then as I was writing that, he got louder in the mix. Wayne comes in, he solos next, and he's adding some nice color. And again, we can hear how broad his range is as a player. Really beautiful stuff by Wayne. He's got an incredible tone, but he's able to access so much. I mean, you hear squeaks, you hear these low passing tones. I mean, he just has incredible range, right? Ron repeats a higher line. I could hear Ron sort of jump up an octave, if you will. Herbie solos next, and he's got some light touches, and then Wayne and Miles reinstate the opening theme. And this tune, this was kind of a mellow tune, and to me it sort of almost was a foreshadow of some of the ambient music that this band would make. So I thought that was kind of interesting. The next song after that is called RJ. So RJ was written by Ron Carter, the bass player. So we hear some fun opening lines by Wayne and Ron. Miles leads in first, right? Tony's Ride, again, it's kind of dominating the soundstage a little bit. That, you hear that rapid, like, but that's sort of the signature sound. One of the signature sounds of the second great quintet is his ride work. And so I just sort of want to reiterate the opening line in the bass in this song. It's very different from what I typically hear in jazz. I mean, it's hard to even express what it is really. It's just like this very strange line. It's really hard to explain. But so Wayne comes in, he takes a solo, and there are these sort of mini breaks in this song, and Wayne is playing the breaks really well, and he's playing some nice ascending lines. He's got some really nice touches. I mean, he's such a great soloist. Herbie takes a solo, and you can hear Tony a little bit more on that. Again, Ron Carter is just playing so well, and then Wayne reprises the opening line again with Ron, like they did when they opened it. Just a really cool tune. I mean, I really enjoyed that song immensely. Flipping over to side 2, we have Agitation opening up on side 2, and this was written by Miles. And this one opens with Tony. He's kind of playing like a little drum solo. It's just him opening up with the drums. He's all over his kit. He's not super flashy. I was listening. He's really tight with his kit, right? He's really, he's got some nice touches, and he was a pretty young guy at this age. I mean, he was, say, 45. Yeah, he was. So just to give an idea of how young Tony was 19 years old when he recorded this album with Miles Davis. So imagine yourself at 19 and playing music with a pantheon like Miles Davis. That's what Tony Williams was doing. And the fact that he was even given the drum chair, and again, he'd been playing with him for almost 2 years, so he started playing with Miles when he was 17. Just an incredible accomplishment for a musician to be playing with such a esteemed player at such a young age. And that says a lot about, Tony Williams, his talent. So he's opening up the song here, and just, again, really nice touches. His solo kind of evens out a little bit. And then Miles comes in with a muted trumpet. Ron is kind of playing some pensive lines. You hear Tony underneath again, just really hitting some nice stuff. There's some interesting counterpoint by Herbie, and then by Ron. And again, this song is sort of defined by that weird counterpoint, if you will. Miles leaves a nice long note with sustain, and his horn sort of decays off, and then Wayne comes right in after that. He drops in next with Ron dropping in more of that counterpoint line, if you will, that I mentioned. It's kind of this song's got some really interesting structure. Wayne is knifing his way in and out of the music. There's again more great pulse by Tony on the cymbals, and then Wayne is more patient before Herbie takes over for his solo. And Herbie plays a pretty mellow solo, a lot of single lines. There's some great tension, and then he builds. There was one line that I thought kind of sounded a little bit haunting, but he was essentially building some tension there. The music quietly chills down before Miles comes back in with his muted trumpet, and then sort of everyone fades out, and then it's just Ron Carter's bass kind of fading out. So interesting tune there. The next song is called Iris. Just bear with me here. Yep. So the next song is called Iris. This one was written by Wayne. And Wayne opens with, and this one really reminded me of the John Coltrane song Naima. It kind of has that sort of Naima opening, if you will. Herbie, he sounds really sprinkling on the keyboard, on his piano. Miles, he comes in next, and pretty mellow soloing by Miles. Again, I could hear some Sketches of Spain type registers and sounds, if you will. And just to sort of re-emphasize that, I mean, I think Sketches of Spain was such a huge album for Miles that, like, it literally stayed in his playing for years after, and even when Miles got into his fusion period, he would talk about that in interviews. He would say, oh, I turned that audience on to Sketches of Spain. I don't think it ever left his playing. I think he always had that sound, right? Miles, he's way out in front. He's got, longer blasts, and you can hear him hitting some really long sustaining notes. Still really good stuff here. Wayne picks right up where Miles left off, and again, similar lines by Wayne. Nothing too outrageous, just real nice, stately for the tune. Herbie takes a turn with Ron and Tony, and it's a pretty nice solo by Herbie. Again, nothing too wild. Tony's building tension underneath. Wayne comes back in and states the opening line. There's a lot of playful playing here as the song sort of heads towards the outro, and then we hear Herbie vamping a little bit more as the track fades. Just a pretty mellow tune, and again, sort of reminding me of Naima. And then the last tune on the album is called Mood. This is probably my favorite my favorite song on the album. This was written by Ron Carter. It starts off with a nice bass piano duet with Ron and Herbie, and then you can hear Tony very subtle underneath. Miles comes in very tastefully, and then it's kind of interesting because Miles comes in, right? And then you hear some subtle dissonance by Herbie, and then Wayne comes in as well, and then Wayne joins, and then Wayne and Miles have these like sort of twisting lines. It's like a musical helix, the way that this song opens. Really nice touches by Wayne. There's a subtle key shift. Again, we hear some sketches of Spain, Miles, in terms of his playing. And then Wayne takes over. It's just Wayne on a solo, and he's got some nice blasts and sustain, if you will. And then Wayne, it's almost like Wayne could hear that sketches of Spain style. It's almost as if Wayne could hear that sketches of Spain style, and you can hear that in his playing. And there's some nice lower notes with vibrato from Wayne. And then Herbie takes over, and he's, it to me sounded like he was barely touching his keys. He's just got a really nice quiet solo. And then he plays a nice ascending line before Wayne and Miles come back in, and they start sort of reharmonizing around that line. But again, that sort of musical helix idea, which is pretty cool. And it's like the line itself almost has an Eastern sound, but it's not quite. It's very interesting sound. And then the track kind of fades out with Ron's bass. Just a great album. These guys, again, the telepathy that these guys had. I mean, I can't reiterate how special this group is. Miles Davis, Wayne Shorter, Tony Williams on drums, Ron Carter on bass, and Herbie Hancock on piano. One of the greatest jazz quintets in the history of jazz. One of the greatest jazz groups in the history of jazz. And they weren't as out there as say Ornette Coleman and John Coltrane, and right around this time in '65, jazz was sort of pivoting towards more of a free jazz avant-garde sound, in addition to like sort of pre-fusion stuff. But the cool thing here is, like the tunes are pretty tight, right? I mean, there's a lot of variety here in terms of the writing. We've got a couple Ron Carter songs, we've got a Wayne Shorter, we've got everyone in the band's writing except for Tony Williams. So there's just a freshness here. The songs are tight, and the improvisation is very loose, as you'd expect. But just a great band. And so, with this band, there was so much music going on, right? So I can't reiterate, so Tony Williams, this album was recorded, as I stated at the outset, January 20th through the 22nd of 1965. Tony Williams was on the drums. He had just recorded his first solo album the previous August in 1964, and Herbie and Ron played on that record. These guys a lot of these guys were playing. Tony, Herbie, and Wayne were signed with Blue Note as well, so they were doing a lot of Blue Note stuff. Their own solo records. They were playing on each other's records. They were playing on other people's records. I mean, this was such a fertile period for these band members. Here's another example: Herbie Hancock. this album was recorded between his previous album, Empyrean Isles, which was recorded in June of 1964 with Ron Carter and Tony Williams playing bass and drums respectively on that. And then following this album, Herbie recorded Maiden Voyage in 1965, and again Ron Carter and Tony Williams both play on that one, bass and drums respectively. And then Wayne Shorter, between his previous two albums, this album was recorded between his most recent album, which was Speak No Evil, on December 24th, 1964, with Ron Carter and Herbie Hancock. And then his album after this one, which was The Soothsayer, that one was recorded on March 4th, 1965, with Ron Carter and Tony Williams on that one. So again, these guys just, you know, super busy. When they're not playing with Miles, they're playing their own, recording their own albums, and sitting in and helping each other out. So, you know, we have this Miles Davis record, right? It's a Columbia record. But, you know, with the lineup, you know, it's you know, we can almost call it a Blue Note record, right? Like all these guys, Shorter, Williams, you know, Ron Carter was playing on a lot of Blue Note stuff, and obviously Herbie was as well. So it's kind of a cool idea to talk about. You know, we've got a great Miles Davis band, but essentially it's a Blue Note all-star band, right? These guys were all making cutting edge music. You know, this was when jazz really was, you know, becoming more free and sort of, you know, pre-avant-garde, like completely wide open free jazz, but, you know, a lot of the solos were almost free, and just some really great stuff. So that's why I chose this record, you know, and it is the 58th anniversary today. It was recorded through the 22nd of January. So a great time just to kick back and listen and enjoy the sounds of this incredible band and the Second Great Quintet. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for this week, guys. I hope you enjoyed. And, you know, definitely, you know, stream it or pick up the record. If you're a big Miles Davis fan, you probably already own this record. But yeah, just some great listening. And hope you enjoyed this week's show. And we look forward to seeing you with you next time. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to leave a comment about this band or anything we talked about today, feel free. Or otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Okay, thanks. Bye.